I'm Renee Shaw. We're now joined by Stuart Ray, one of 7 Republicans running in the 3rd Congressional District. Mr. Ray satisfied our criteria to appear tonight. A reminder, you can ask him a question on Twitter at KYTonight, KET. Send an email to kytonight@ket.org or use the web form at ket.org/kytonight, or you may give us a call, 1-800-494-7605. Mr. Ray, pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
You are no stranger to politics, and we'll get into that a little bit and to Frankfurt. But let's tell folks why you're running for the 3rd Congressional District seat.
Sure. Thank you. Well, I'm Stuart Ray, and I do represent the 3rd District, which is practically all of Louisville, without a few other, a little bit of Eastern Jefferson County not included. But I'm a businessman. I'm an outsider, and I have been motivated to want to contribute and want to run for Congress because I'm not satisfied with the state of the country. I'm certainly not satisfied with the state of Louisville, Kentucky, and those are kind of some of the factors that motivated me to run.
Sure. Let's start with why you're not satisfied with the country first, and then we'll drill down to Louisville, Jefferson County.
Sure. Inflation is a key driver. Again, coming from a world of business, I've seen the negative impacts on inflation over the years on business, but primarily on individuals and the people of our community. It's a terrible tax on the citizens of Louisville and in the country. I'm certainly not satisfied with where things are internationally as well. So it's really a combination of what this administration is doing both internationally and economically, and then the impact it's having on my community.
So what specific economic policy of the administration do you disagree with and you think it's harming the country?
Well, you touched on it previously a little bit. The spending is, I think, unsustainable and out of control. We used to talk about hundreds of billions of dollars, and now we talk about trillions of dollars like it's a common number that rolls off people's tongues. And I wasn't in complete favor of the 1.4 trillion spent last time. There's good spending out there. I am for economic development. I'm certainly for infrastructure
Would you
spending.
have voted for the COVID relief packages?
I think that the COVID relief package originally certainly needed to be passed. This last infrastructure 1.4 trillion, I think there was a lot of pork in that, as they used to say.
Would you have voted for it?
I did not like much of the excess spending in it. At the 11th hour, I probably would have voted for it because maybe it was $700 billion worth of infrastructure spending. I think would have been a very good thing, is a very good thing for the country. I just wish it could have been trimmed significantly. Internationally,
you're a critic of the Biden administration. What is he doing internationally that you're displeased with?
The Ukraine situation is obviously a huge concern of mine. I stand with the people of Ukraine. I'm dissatisfied with how slow it took the Biden administration to act on Ukraine. I think we should have supported them much more faster and significantly with military investments, with weaponry. I'm sorry?
With troops?
No, not with troops, but supported them earlier. I mean, we saw 150,000 troops from Russia building in Poland and on the borders of Ukraine. So it was no surprise that Russia was going to take action in Ukraine. And I think we were very, very slow to support Ukraine.
Do you think that former President Trump, do you think he would have done a better job in handling the conflict or would have staved the conflict off?
I don't necessarily know that he would have done it. I think the Republican Party was trying to press for earlier action, and I would have supported that significantly. But it didn't look like he was being very supportive of Ukraine and what was transpiring there, even under his administration.
There have been some parallels drawn between the response in Ukraine versus previous conflicts in Rwanda and other countries in Africa. Do you care to respond on the perception of the United States' quick intervention, perhaps, or not as quick, but certainly more intervention there than perhaps in other countries?
Well, that was many years ago, and I think it would be, anytime there's a democracy and free people, I think we should support and intervene as a leader of the free world immediately upon those actions. So I'm not so sure I can really comment on the comparisons, but we should be a clear leader of the free world and support countries that need that, regardless of where they're located.
So now that we are where we are with the conflict and the Biden administration has moved perhaps too slow for you, what can be done to accelerate Putin's exit from Ukraine? And do you think that's even a possibility?
No, I hope it's a possibility. I pray for the people of Ukraine. Going back a little bit, when President Biden announced sanctions in Ukraine, I probably, like many other people, thought, well, this is a great thing. I'm glad we're finally putting sanctions on Russia and really strongly supporting Ukraine. And then 2 weeks later, President Biden comes out and says, well, we're putting additional sanctions out on Ukraine. And I'm like, I felt like we had passed all the sanctions that we could have possibly passed, but then we learned that there were additional sanctions that we could have passed. So I think we've been slow dealing it, for lack of a better term, on what we could have done to support Ukraine. I certainly think that we have taken many actions more recently to support them with additional funding and additional arms, and I want to make sure that we do as much as we possibly can and afford for the people of Ukraine.
How will we know that we've won the war or helped Ukraine win the war?
There's signs, I think. I think that there's obviously Ukraine is doing a fantastic job. The people of Ukraine and their military are doing a fantastic job, as disadvantaged as they are against Russia. So how it's won, I'm not so sure. I'm that smart.
Let's talk about Jefferson County and what you'd like to see happen for the 3rd Congressional District. What are your ideas?
Well, I'm a businessman, so I lead with economic opportunities, and I'm very excited for Kentucky when I see billions being spent in Elizabethtown and billions being spent in Bowling Green and these 2 new battery factory announcements. But the reality is Louisville, Kentucky has lost more corporate headquarters, and we've lost a lot of economic opportunity between Papa John's pulling out and going mainly down to Atlanta, and Yum has also retracted their presence in Louisville. So I want to attract a combination. I want to be a friend to big employers that can add really quality economic jobs for people of our community. And I want to attract additional businesses to come to Louisville, Kentucky. I kind of call it the athletic porthole. Like when you're recruiting, we need to covet the players we have, and we need to attract new talent and bring them into our economy. Those good jobs, I think, would be supportive for our entire community. I'd like to see a more well-balanced approach, including Western Louisville and Southern Louisville too, because I think they've been ignored.
Crime in Jefferson County is an issue that makes headlines, if not daily, at least a couple of times a week.
It does.
There was a recent discussion in Louisville about violence that involved the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. U of L trauma surgeon Dr. Keith Miller said during that time that in Louisville, quote, he says, we've lost more years of potential life to gun violence in the last year than we have to COVID. What do you believe are the right solutions to curb gun violence in Louisville?
Certainly. I think we need to support our police. I am pro-police. I don't think it needs to be, a wave or enforcements, but currently right now, and we could argue the numbers or people do, but we're currently understaffed by roughly 300 officers, plus or minus, in Louisville. And that's doing 2 terrible things. It's a combination of it's jeopardizing the lives of our citizens in Louisville, all of Louisville, and it's also jeopardizing the lives of our existing police officers, being 300 members understaffed. So I definitely think we need a strong police force and a well-funded police force. But I think that there's a lot of great ideas in community policing. I think that is a wonderful expression where police are engaged in their own community, live in their own community. That's a combination of a new expression right now, but it's a little bit old school, where maybe the families and the kids knew their police officers.
Some would say that the root cause of some of the violence that happens is poverty, lack of opportunity.
Sure.
How would you address those issues?
I have a tendency to agree with that, and that's where I've said tongue-in-cheek a little bit that no one would applaud me if I brought a new corporate headquarters to Hurstbourne Lane on the eastern part of Jefferson County. But the reality is, if we have a more balanced economic development plan in Louisville, if we add really great jobs in the West End, and if we add great jobs and opportunities beyond a gas station or a service station in South Louisville, then those good paying jobs, I'm not talking about, entry-level service type jobs, but those really good paying jobs could really boost our entire city as a whole.
So if you were elected to serve in Washington, what would you do on the fiscal front to help all boats rise?
Well, again, fiscally, as a congressman, right now I think the spending needs to be brought under control because we cannot sustain $1.5 trillion spending every quarter or as fast as this administration would like to. But I would like to bring economic opportunity to a well-balanced Louisville, like I said, west and south. And sometimes simply, our congressman in the city of Louisville has not been very visible. I think at a minimum, you could be a cheerleader. We have great footprints throughout our community that are way underdeveloped. And I think if we could help develop those areas, at a minimum, be a great cheerleader for the city of Louisville and reach out to corporations and reach out to employers, whether it's medical or manufacturing, and have them invest in our city because at the end of the day, it's a great city.
As I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that you're no stranger to politics or to Frankfort.
Sure.
You were appointed in 2010 as commission member to the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, and you've donated to both Democrats and Republicans. I think you've donated to mayoral candidate Craig Greenberg. So you call yourself a particular type of Republican, and I want you to define what you mean by reasonably minded. What does that mean?
Well, it means I do want to bring our entire community together. And obviously, we know that Louisville, it's no surprise. It's been a heavily Democrat run and driven city. Congressman Yarmouth has represented the community in the city of Louisville for the last 16 years. I have been appointed by a Democrat governor to serve on the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I brought some expertise to that, and I think we did a good job. I also was appointed to the KFC Yum Center and served on that board both under Bashir and under Bevan. And I think at the end of the day, if you could reach out and work with all parties and all people throughout our entire community and be a unifier, I don't want partisanship driving Louisville, Kentucky, and Washington. I want to unify and work. And if that means for the betterment of Louisville across party lines, then I'm more than willing to do that.
So can you give us an example of a congressional Republican currently with who you would align with politically in terms of ideology?
I don't know that I really want to name names, but I do go back to Ann Northup, who previously represented our community. And Ann and I are friends, and I worked with her and represented her, worked with her and supported her early on. And she represented Louisville for 12 years, so it was no short stint. And clearly, Congressman Yarmouth has had a stronghold, but naming an active congressman might be a little tough, but I think I hearken back to Ann's representation. She did a lot of good work, and a lot of people think of her fondly. I'd like to carry on in that type of tradition.
As you just mentioned, the political composition of the 3rd Congressional District makes it tough for Republicans.
It does.
What argument are you making to voters, not just in the Republican primary, but to widen your appeal for the general election?
Correct. Well, I want to win the Republican primary first and foremost. And then when it comes to the general, I think that they need to look at the representation of the city of Louisville and what's transpired both on a national basis with previous Congressman Yarmouth as well as President Biden. I think there's a lot of remorse for this administration and the state of the country. And our mayoral representation has been I think it's been sad what's happened to Louisville in the last 2 or 3 years. So I think the entire city needs a big change. And I think that both Democrats and Republicans they've proven they're supporting me so far in my race, and I'm hopeful to get their support in November.
So if you were sent to Washington, what are 3 top issues that you'd want to tackle and to address?
Well, I want to tackle first and foremost inflation, because I do think we need to rein in the spending, and we just cannot sustain not only the 1.4 trillion a quarter, 1.5, but the $30 trillion in the national debt is in my opinion, unsustainable for the country. I am very pro-safety, and I do think that that can be addressed at a federal level as well.
What do you mean by that, pro-safety?
Well, pro-safety in our community, pro-law enforcement, but I also, I would like to identify federal funding, and unfortunately, I want to put, I say unfortunately, I want to put metal detectors in front of JCPS schools. I want to harden school entrances. There's a gun in Jefferson County Public Schools, I believe, every day. They have found more this year than in any year in the past. I think it's close to 20 guns that they've identified. Unfortunately, with backpacks being brought into JCPS schools, I think that there's additional guns in schools every day. It's an unfortunate world we live in, but I do think we need to make sure that guns aren't in schools. And as a result, I think we simply need to send them. If you go to an airport, if you go to a congressional building, or if you go into any kind of public building, if you go to a sporting event, you go through a metal detector and your bags are scanned. I think we can do that quickly and unintrusively into JCPS schools and make sure that there's not one gun in our schools, make sure there aren't any knives, make sure there aren't illicit drugs. And we've got a huge drug problem in Louisville as well. I kind of relate that to the southern border problem too, because I think it's proven that a lot of the illicit drugs, fentanyl and the barbiturates are coming in through the Mexican border.
Well, Mr. Stuart Ray, we appreciate you being here tonight and for your communication with the voters of the 3rd Congressional District.
Thanks, Renee. I appreciate it.
Yeah.